in at number 9, we have Alexandria Thomas. Alexandria Thomas and her mother broke down during a hearing at the Palm Beach County Jail in Florida. The woman was accused of stabbing her boyfriend to death outside a supermarket in Palm Beach. She was standing before a judge who told her her boyfriend was in a medically induced coma. The woman soon understood how serious the charges against her were, and this was her reaction. As you can see, it was all very intense. Here we have her mother outside of the courtroom, and she's still very emotional.
I know she's very worried about the victim who was her boyfriend, who she loved very much.
Coming into number 8, we have Kay Andrea Cook. Kay Andrea's reaction to her sentencing went so viral that we could not discuss it in this video. The then teenager received 20 years for carjacking an elaborate dating app plot that ended in the shooting of another teenager. At the time, Kay Andrea was 18, and when she was read her 20-year sentence, this is what happened first.
Years in state prison.
So yeah, that's her mother screaming and crying and losing it. I honestly feel like her mum really set her off, because this was then Kay Andrea's response. Neither of them took it well. It was very emotional, and honestly, it's pretty stressful to watch. Coming into number 6, we have Kayla Ray Norton. So this actually wasn't a life sentence, but it was a pretty long sentence and a fierce reaction. White supremacist Kayla Ray Norton and Jose Torres gatecrashed a black 8-year-old's birthday party with and a Confederate flag in Douglasville in July 2015. Now the pair were just part of a wider group, but the group did repeatedly use the N-word to the children. Now this was deemed as racially motivated. It also came a month after fellow supremacist Dylan Roof killed 9 African Americans in a church, so it was a very sensitive time. Anyway, we can all agree that this was awful behaviour from Kayla and friends, and this was her reaction to her 6-year sentence.
Not me. That's not me, that's not him. I would never walk up.
She did seem pretty sorry. She broke down in tears, and she did say she accepted her sentence. Check it out at number 4. Paul Margaret was arrested by King Henry VIII and his henchmen. She was brought for execution at the Tower of London without trial, so basically her trial was that day, found her guilty, and yeah, her head was coming off. On the 27th of May, a summer's morning, Lady Margaret proclaimed that she was not going to lay her head on the execution block, and if the executioner wanted to decapitate her, he would have to do it where she stood. He did it, but he missed her neck, and she ran around screaming, scratching, and hissing. She literally spat blood at those who wrongly accused her. Eventually, after 11 blows, she was killed, but it's said that her ghost still haunts the Tower of London today. For number 2, we have this Miami screamer. This is so intense. A woman who lived in Miami was arrested for killing her husband, a crime that would carry a life sentence. As she meets with a judge in a bail hearing in 2013, she applies for bond, but she is denied. This was her reaction. She is distressed and also scantily dressed. She's wheeled in a wheelchair, and she seems like clothing has been placed over her rather than on her. I'm not quite sure what's going on here.
Your Honor, if I may.
Me tengo que ir a la cárcel así, pero mi marido me pegó. Si eres el que me rompió la pierna, por favor, my husband broke my leg. Please, no, don't do that. I have my leg broke.
Anyway, she screams that her husband broke her legs, seeming to confess to the killing, but in self-defense. Seriously, she is screaming at that judge. Next up, we have Tatiana Fusari. 27-year-old Tatiana Fusari and her partner Seth Welch were charged with murder and first-degree when their daughter died of malnutrition and dehydration. The pair said that they did not seek medical help when they noticed that their daughter looked ill because of, I quote, religious reasons. Miss Fusari and Mr. Welch heard their charge together, and I know this video is female convicts freaking out, but honestly the combination of both of them is pretty priceless. As they hear that they're being charged for murder, this is their reaction.
To a child, they're talking about this Mary Welch. It is a felony Possible penalty of up to life imprisonment or any term of years less than life.
This is basically how they reacted when they found out they could be spending their life in jail. Next up, we have Sheila McFarland. Sheila McFarland was convicted of being involved in the murder of informant Robert Williams, who was killed by a hired assassin for communicating with police in a investigation. The pair behind his killing were found to be Eddie Brown Lee and Miss McFarland herself, so the judge, Daniel Gall, convicted McFarland of involvement in the murder and sentenced her to life in jail. She blurted out that she thought that he was racist, and then she had this to say.
No, because you have always been disrespectful to me, and you don't like black people, and you definitely don't like me.
Judge Gall accused her of playing the race card. He said, when you try and flip the script, when you play the race card in a disgusting fashion, but most importantly, when you manipulate the system of justice by murdering a witness in a criminal trial, you will pay the harshest possible penalty. This next one makes me feel really sad. A lot of courtroom freakouts are moments of indignation, but some are from utterly broken people who know they did a terrible, terrible thing and they can't take it back. That is the theme going on here with Jodie Herring up next. So Jodie Herring was sentenced for killing a social worker who took away custody of her daughter. Lara Sobel was killed as she was leaving work, and Herring then went on to kill 3 of her own relatives. She shot them. The deaths were totally tragic and motivated by revenge. However, Herring pleaded that she was suffering from mental health issues. She accepted responsibility for the murders, and on the day of sentencing, she made this sad outburst.
And I'm very sorry. I can't take back that day. I wish I could, but I can't. I handle my stress so differently than anybody else does, and I wish I could help myself. I really could. I asked for help several times, and I didn't get it.
Honestly, how horrible for her family, her children, and the family of Lara Sobel. Lara's sister said, she took a life, my sister's life. She took 3 other lives, and she doesn't deserve to have 1 day of liberty. Herring did indeed get life without parole. Finally, now this may seem like a tenuous link, but honestly it works. It is so dramatic. We have the woman who freaked out at the James Holmes sentencing. This is Deborah Cave's crazy reaction taking the first place spot here. So James Holmes, as you may know, killed 12 people at a movie theater in Aurora as they watched Batman in 2012. It was horrible, it was disgusting, it was a massacre. He was being sentenced for 12 counts of life. Attorney George Brochler was pushing for the death penalty. Cave shouted out in defense of the killer. It was a really weird and dramatic outburst. She proclaimed that actually James Holmes was her son. Oh, dramatic. Have a listen to the first part.
Mental illness is everything. I'm the biological mother. She's the surrogate. They took him away from me, and they adopted because they know they had mental illness. All of my family's full of FBI.
So yeah, she's saying his parents took him away from her. As she was then removed from the courtroom, she screams this.
No! Kill him! Kill him! It's not his fault!
Honestly, such high drama. You can then hear her screams down the hall for a very long time. She herself became a convict as she was sentenced to 3 weeks in jail for contempt of court. Seriously, what a freak out and what an outburst.
Coming in at number 10, we have Sally Skull. Sally Skull was known to be a great shooter, a cusser, and a horse thief. She had a total of 5 husbands whom she kept for as long as they could handle her. Some divorced, while others found mysterious exits. Sally grew up tough, having to defend their farm constantly from intruders, and once watched her mother Rachel, the name, chop off the toes of a man trying to break in. I really shouldn't relate my name to that situation, but here we are. So as a result, Sally was always ready to fight and apparently didn't take much to start gunslinging. And reportedly, she was ambidextrous and could shoot with both her right and left hand. She was also known, of course, for her horse wrangling, which wasn't always legal. In fact, most often, it wasn't. Sally would ride from Texas to Mexico there and back by herself, and always come back with horses to trade and unharmed. Clearly, this was a woman who people thought twice about when it came to messing with her. Coming in at number 9, we have Ma Barker. Before she became Ma Barker, she was Arizona Donnie Clark, a fiery, ill-tempered, restless girl stuck in the small ways of life. But when she saw infamous outlaw Jesse James ride through town, she saw her future flash before her eyes, and boy did she want it. Arizona married a soft-spoken man named George Barker, who did nothing to fulfill her dreams besides give her 4 troublesome boys. But soon, her boys became one of the most iconic gangs of the West, with Ma Barker orchestrating the whole thing. The Barker Karpis gang made away with $500,000 in cash and bonds in their first bank robbery, and they didn't stop there. The second robbery wasn't as clean, but it solidified a murderous reputation for the group. Ma Barker soon made it to the top of the most wanted list before she died in an epic shootout with police on January 16, 1935. Ma Barker got what she wanted at the end: adventure, a notorious reputation, and took down all those who got in her way. Coming in at number 8, we have Belle Starr. Here we have another infamous name of the West, Belle Starr. Most of Belle's life involved relationships with some already infamous outlaws like notorious bank train robber Jesse James, as I already mentioned. Belle's marriage to Jim Reed was the beginning of her life of crime though. Reed and his family were constantly running from the law, and allegedly Belle joined in, though some historians suggest that was not the case. She did take their 2 children and rejoined her family before Reed died in 1874. But then she met Sam Starr, a Cherokee and part of the Starr gang, and there was no going back. Over the course of her marriage, legends of Belle spread across the West. She carried 2 pistols at all time, wore gold earrings and a man's feather-brimmed hat. She was arrested several times over the course of her career, but after Sam was killed, she reformed and never even sheltered criminals ever again. When she married a 3rd time, she didn't even defend her husband when he was accused of horse thievery. But that didn't stop someone from building a vendetta against her. The life and crimes of Belle Starr came to an end when she was shot to death riding home from her friends, but to this day, no one knows who put an end to the legend. Alright, coming in at number 7, we have Rachel Wall. Now, we've talked about some outlaws on land, but what about those on the sea? Rachel Wall was someone you never wanted to come across if you wanted to live a long and healthy life. Rachel loved the sea and wanted to be as close as possible, which is partly why she married a fisherman, George Wall. What drew the couple to piracy though, no one knows, but boy were they good at it. Whenever there was a bad storm, they would disguise their stolen ship, the Essex, and make it look like it crashed. Rachel would then pose on the ship, luring sailors nearby with cries for help, so she was kind of like the first siren. As soon as they were close enough though, they would rob and kill all of them. Over the course of the pirating career, they killed 24 sailors and robbed 12 ships, accounting in $12,000 cash. But one night their plot went horribly wrong and George was drowned at sea, leaving Rachel all alone. But she didn't stop there and instead resorted to highway robbery. She just couldn't stop. She loved it. Unfortunately though for Rachel, she robbed the wrong bonnet one day and was convicted. She was one of New England's first female pirates and the last woman to be hung in the Boston Common of Massachusetts. Coming in at number 6, we have Ruth Eisman Scheer, coming up closer to modern day. Ruth Eisman Scheer, one of the few women to make it onto the FBI's most wanted list. Her and her boyfriend at the time kidnapped a rich heiress named Barbara Mackle and ransomed her for $500,000. Keep in mind this was in the 1960s, so that may not seem like a ton of money to go through kidnapping someone now, but it was back then. But they didn't just tie her up in a basement and leave her for days or something like that. No, what she did was something incredibly terrifying. They buried Barbara alive in a coffin. Fortunately, they fed a ventilated tube into the coffin so they could keep her alive as a bargaining chip. Thankfully though, Mackle was found 3.5 days later, dehydrated, starving, but still alive. Ruth's lover, Gary Christ, was arrested almost right away, but it would be 79 days until they would catch Ruth. She was arrested in Oklahoma while pretending to be a 19-year-old college student, but obviously her disguise wasn't good enough. Ruth only served 4 of her 7-year sentence before she was deported back to Honduras. Listen, anyone who can bury anyone alive sounds absolutely terrifying to me, which is why Ruth Eisman is on this list. And arriving at number 5, we have Juana Barraza. Mexican wrestler turned killer, Juana Barraza's life is anything but boring. Juana had a torturous childhood, suffering from abuse from her parents, and never even learned how to read. When she finally left home, Barraza endured several failed marriages, miscarriages, and her firstborn was killed during an episode of gang violence at the age of 24. But during the 1980s, 1990s, she toured central Mexico as a masked wrestler named La Dame de Silencio, the Lady of Silence. But unfortunately, she still fell into poverty and eventually hatched a plan to steal from the elderly, which eventually evolved to murder. Her and her accomplice would dress as nurses to gain access and then rob the elderly homeowner once inside. But her accomplice double-crossed her, getting her corrupt police boyfriend to extort her for the money she stole in exchange for not being arrested. So she was kind of broke even then. After retiring from wrestling in 2000, Barraza became more desperate, which is when the killings began. Barraza Margot evaded police for years as they weren't even looking for a woman but a man. She was even on TV for an interview a week before her arrest and no one suspected a thing. The only reason she was caught was that someone saw her leave a crime scene and she was arrested right on the spot. Despite being illiterate, they found trophies and paper clippings of all the crimes she committed. She was able to evade capture and suspicion for 5 years, and her crimes still haunt Mexico to this day. Coming in at number 4, we have Margot Freshwater. This next one definitely sounds like something that belongs in Orange is the New Black. In 1970, Margot Freshwater was serving out her sentence for first-degree murder in Tennessee all-female prison, but not for long. On October 4th, her and her inmate Faye Fairchild dodged armed officers escorting them and scaled the fence and caught a one-way ticket to freedom. Margot would be on the run for 32 years, only to be discovered as a grandmother of 7 with 2 children in Idaho. But that's not even the wildest part. The way she got into prison in the first place is kinda crazy. Margot was trying to convince a lawyer to help her get her current boyfriend out of jail. She and the lawyer soon began an affair, but the thing was, the lawyer was kind of paranoid that people were after him. So what did he do? They went on a crime spree, killing 2 convenience store clerks and a cab driver. The lawyer was committed to a mental asylum, but Margot was convicted of murder for all 3 crimes, even though she claimed he forced her to. Still, after she escaped and 32 years on the run, she was placed back in prison in 2002, only serving time until she was released in 2011. We're arriving at our top 3 now, guys, so if you do like this video, tell us. Press the little button that looks like this down there, and then we'll keep going. Coming in at number 3, we have Griselda Blanco, a woman you would never want to cross paths with. If you did, you probably wouldn't live to tell the tale. Also known as the Black Widow and the Queen of Cocaine, Griselda was a central figure in the drug wars of America during the 1970s and 80s. She trafficked cocaine with the Medellin cartel in high-profile areas like Miami, Florida, New York, and Southern California. She was said to be an absolutely ruthless killer, and while authorities only convicted her for 40 deaths, there is reason to suspect her number hits over 200. She was also notorious for murdering her husbands over trivial matters, but especially over money. But her bloodlust didn't stop there. Griselda was known for holding all-female orgies where she would execute all the strippers afterward for pleasure. Blanco had the DEA on her trail for years, but she always managed to cleverly evade them. That is, until she was finally caught in 1985. Still, she was able to strike a deal and only serve 15 years in prison for her crimes. Some even say there was some manipulation of the trial when it came to those who testified. But after Griselda was released in 2004, someone still had it out for her, and she was assassinated after she was deported to Colombia at the age of 69. This woman was 100% lethal and the last person you would have wanted to be stuck in a room with. Coming in at number 2, we have Hazel Leota Head. Now for an outlaw who is still on the run today. Hazel Leota Head is wanted for the murder of widower Charles Barker in 1998. Imagine if someone watching this is like, oh wait, I saw her at the grocery store yesterday. Charles Barker had recently lost his wife of 11 years due to a drunk driver and fell into a deep depression. He spent a lot of the insurance money gambling and drinking, which is where he got the attention of Hazel Leota Head, or Deanna Ray as he would know her. Within a few days, she moved in with him. His family was excited that he'd met someone, but after meeting her, daughter Jennifer was like, yeah, she's after your money, Dad. And Charles was like, yeah, I think she is too. Don't worry, I'll talk to her about it. She never heard from him again and was found with a bullet in the back of his head. Hazel, nowhere to be seen. His gun was wiped clean, the safe was entirely empty, which meant $45,000 were missing, and his car was found at an airport with DNA in the seat that identified Deanna as Hazel. Hazel reportedly had been married over 10 times and used alias after alias for each of them. She is wanted also for arson, theft, and now murder. Hazel would be 72 years old today and counting, so if you spot her, tell someone. Probably a good idea. Coming in at number 1, we have Ching Shi. From prostitute to pirate lord, Ching Shi was one of the most infamous pirates to rule the high seas. Highly organized, ruthless, and precise, Ching Shi eventually ruled over as many as 50 to 70,000 pirates in her lifetime. While working as a prostitute, she caught the eye of already famous pirate captain of the Red Flag Fleet, Cheng Yi. There are multiple accounts as to how they got together, but both versions involve the captain proposing to her. She said yes, but not before she negotiated that they would share the power of the fleet and any plunder. Together they grew the fleet from 200 ships to 1,800 and categorized their fleet by colors, red being in the lead, the others being black, yellow, white, and blue. But only 6 years into their marriage, Xiang Yi died, and Qing Shi stepped into the role wholeheartedly. She ran a tight ship, handing out fierce punishments to all those who disobeyed the code. She was strict with her prisoners, keeping her men in check should any woman be taken in. Should they take a wife? Fine, but they had to remain faithful, if not, dead. If they took a woman against her will, dead. Any who deserted would be hunted down, tortured, then killed. The Red Fleet eventually felt like a floating country, even routinely taxing villages. She earned the name the Terror of South China, and soon the Chinese government realized they couldn't defeat her, so they made a bargain. A bargain that allowed her to retire wherever she liked and bathe in her riches. There's actually so much to this story, but for now, I think we can all agree she would have been the last person you wanted to see on the horizon.